morning, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Dr. Nicole Nunez, and I'm joined by my colleague Allison Chaffee of Eureka Therapeutics. And we're coming together today in recognition of Hepatoblastoma Awareness Day, happening May 25th, 2026. So let's first talk about what hepatoblastoma is. It's a rare pediatric cancer that's specifically a cancer of the liver that impacts roughly 100 to 200 children every year in the US. And while long-term survival is upwards of 80% for children with localized disease, it is often not the same story for children with high-risk cases. For some of these children and their families, facing a late-stage cancer diagnosis is a path marked by courage, love, and sometimes profound loss. We are deeply grateful to be joined today by Christina Stiverson, author of the book, I Carry You. Her book is a heartfelt tribute to her daughter, Addie, providing a powerful reflection of their journey through pediatric cancer, while also serving as a guide for anyone facing unimaginable grief. Christina, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. I'm really honored to be partnered with you guys, and I really love the work that you do, and I'm always happy to be part of it.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you. Before we begin today's conversation, we want to acknowledge that it may bring up strong emotions. We encourage everyone to take care of themselves and in whatever way they need, so we can discuss and reflect further together.
Great. Thank you, Allison, for that note. And again, if anyone has any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A section. You should see that little button at the top of the webinar, and we'll get to those at the end. So, Christina, I'd love to start by introducing the audience to your incredible little girl, Addie. So let's go all the way back to the beginning. I'd like you to take us back to December 3rd, 2013, and share with us why Addie was a warrior from the get-go.
Oh, thanks for asking, Nicole. I was born 2 months early. I was actually medevaced to Anchorage, which was 350 miles away, and she was born at 32 weeks, and we spent some time in the NICU. And so one of the things with hepatoblastoma that we found out kind of later on was that as a preemie, maybe her liver wasn't fully developed, and that could have contributed to the hepatoblastoma. So she was 2 months early, but she was such a fighter in the NICU that she came home after 2 weeks, and she was only 5 pounds. And I felt like she was a warrior from the beginning. She came home 6 weeks before her due date and just kept on thriving. And eventually she caught up. As a preemie, she caught up by when she turned two, like between 1 and 2, she caught up to normal baby size and everything like that. So I didn't know what it was going to be like to deal with a preemie, but yeah, later on we're finding out that, you know, that could have had something to do with the hepatoblastoma. Later research has shown that. And so, but yeah, I feel like she was a warrior right out of the gate.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And definitely, I just loved how you started with the book with that, because it really did set the stage. I felt like in terms of, you know, how she just kind of came into this world, and she was already, you know, already fighting and already the strong warrior. So thank you for sharing. So what I'd like to do now is I want to fast forward 2 years. Okay, so at this point you have 2 under 2. Bless your heart, I've been there. And so you have Addie, and then you have her younger sister Amelia, Millie. And so now we're leading up to Addie's 2nd birthday, and you started to notice some changes in her that were brushed off even by healthcare professionals as normal toddler development and behavior. So what I want to focus on is what kind of changes did you see, and how did your unwavering persistence that something wasn't right lead up to that moment that you call in the book before and after?
Yeah, I used to take her into the clinic, and I would say, you know, she's kind of vomiting, and I don't think it's the stomach flu, and she's having unusual fevers, and they would say, oh, it's teething. And you know, I even got prescribed an unreasonable amount of iron supplements because I made them do a blood test, and they were like, yeah, her iron's low. And the doctor gave me probably more iron than was prescribed for a toddler. And I mean, later when she got diagnosed, we realized that that was a sign, but nobody saw it because nobody was looking for cancer like that. That's the thing that's really hard. And once we got diagnosed, our doctor did say most local pediatricians will never see a case of cancer, childhood cancer, in their whole career. So they're not looking for it, right? When you go in, but you and I both know there's that mother intuition that something bigger is going on. We had ended up in the emergency room. We had considered UTIs. I was driving myself crazy with Google. And eventually on Thanksgiving, I kind of had this epic meltdown of something's wrong with my child and I don't know what it is. And we flew from Alaska to Colorado to see Cody's family for Thanksgiving. And that's when I took her to the Children's Hospital in Colorado. And to be honest, I think they listened and they were looking for something different. They knew. I said, I've been through the ringer for 4 or 5 months. Here are the signs. They tell me nothing's wrong, but I know something's wrong. And within 8 hours, she was diagnosed with stage 3 hepatoblastoma, something I couldn't even spell at the time, had no idea, no history of cancer in our family, really, and just totally unexpected, right? Because it is a cancer that's 1 in a million and nobody expects it. And so within 8 hours, they had found the tumor in her belly that was a cantaloupe-sized tumor. And I felt this, I was in pretty good disbelief because I was living in like a baby bubble. I didn't even realize that kids got cancer in my world. Like, where were those St. Jude commercials when I just wasn't paying attention, right? And so I was really caught off guard. Nobody expects that. And we were rushed to the Children's Hospital right away, and immediately started all of the treatment. So that's not really, our life was really changed forever in that moment before, we had childhood cancer in our life. And now after, we are definitely figuring out what life looks like with a pediatric cancer diagnosis. And our audience here probably knows quite a bit about hepatoblastoma. And I've heard over the years a lot of kids, people relating with my story about how they were also diagnosed. And it's not often caught early. Our doctor said most of it is caught later.
I think a lot of other people on the call can also relate to something that you were experiencing during this time after diagnosis, which is anxiety. And that, for those of you who aren't familiar, that's when you're waiting anxiously to hear scan results. How is your child responding to treatments? But something that's also unique to hepatoblastoma is that you're often also waiting to hear back about blood tests. In particular, for hepatoblastoma, we track a biomarker called alpha-fetoprotein, also known as AFP. And if it's rising or falling, this can tell you whether or not if you're having some sort of response to treatment. So you often want to see that decline to indicate that that your child's responding. I wanted you to walk us through a little bit about what it was like having to track these blood tests, and especially I want to talk about how important even just a decimal could make in terms of like how you react to what these blood tests are being reported as to you.
I learned really early on is patient advocacy became very important to me, because when you think about it, I have one patient and they have many, right? And they're just trying to, there's a reason that medical doctors call what they do a practice, because nobody's perfect and everybody is learning some things as they go as well. And the hardest part about that is my child's life depends on it. And when you're waiting for that AFP result every 2 weeks and seeing if it went up or down, and the half-life of the AFP, and you're waiting for it to either drop or go up by that amount, it can be really scary when something happens that you don't expect. And one time, something that happened to me was the nurse had called me and she wasn't familiar with AFP or or what we were going through or hepatoblastoma. And she called and she left a voicemail that said the AFP number. And instead of 48,000, she said 480,000. And I thought, it sent me into a complete spiral. And everybody's AFP number is different, right? There are kids that are diagnosed and their AFP numbers are extremely high. Like I've seen as high as millions. And then some people relapse or have really low AFP markers in a couple thousands, So it's a really big variety and range. The key is the half-life, right? What's going to happen with your AFP. Mm-hmm. And this was 10 times what we were expecting. And I thought, oh my gosh, it has spread to her entire body. And we have days left. Like this has literally jumped from a few thousand to 500,000 and it's over. And I spiraled into this terrible thought before I considered what the mistake could have been. And I left these messages and you can't reach the nurses and oh my gosh. And so that was probably one of the worst nights I experienced. And it just goes to show you how much. And then the next day I had gotten a call back and they were like, I'm sorry, we read it wrong. The decimal place was off. It was really, 48,000. And you're like, you sort of breathe a sigh of relief, but also it wasn't the result we were hoping for because it had doubled. Yeah. But at least I thought, well, gosh, it's not like I have hours left because it has spread throughout her whole body. So the biggest thing I can say there is patient advocacy is so important, and knowing that you're monitoring your child really closely, but to ask questions about everything they tell you. And scanxiety is real, right? We're on edge every couple weeks, every month, or a couple months when the scans come, because you don't know what's going on behind her body that you can't see. Like, is it spreading? How many nodules may have spread to her lungs? What does it look like? And you can, people make up stories about what they don't know. So your brain can go 100 miles an hour and just convince yourself of what those scans are going to show. You always hope for the best, but we would go on this up and down ride with the AFP. It would go high and we'd be like, okay, we need to crack down on the treatment. It would go lower and you're like, something's working. And so it's a crazy parabola of emotions to follow throughout her journey. And it turned out that, Addie's cancer ended up being really aggressive, and the AFP kind of kept rising even with the chemo treatment. And that's what led us to transplant, where they said this is a full liver transplant. And fortunately, we were able to get a liver transplant because it hadn't spread. There's a key note there that we'll probably never know, but we didn't have a scan right before the transplant. And so we'll never know if it was aggressive or spread before or after the transplant. But what I can say there to families and parents is just to ask all the questions and don't feel like it is not your right as a parent to know everything and take care of your child, because that is your focus.
Christina, on the note of chemo, when you're talking about it, I feel like we hear more about adult side effects going on through chemo and what they're experiencing, and childhood chemo is not really talked about as often. And so you were talking about the endless diaper changes in your book, and that's not talked about, and ways that it impacts your child, and how something Sadie helped you guys. Do you want to elaborate on that?
I will say that I was caught off guard initially because they tell you have to wear these rubber gloves to change your child's diaper, because this stuff is so toxic that it can affect your skin. And that just puts into reality what's going through your child's body and how toxic it is. And you're thinking my gosh, this is when it hits. And so you're just hoping that it is killing all this cancer, but it's killing so much of the good stuff too, right? Like their immunity, and they go down to having so little immunity to things that you end up being in the hospital quite a bit and not being able to do certain things. And I remember we packed all of her like safety items, just her comfort items to go to the hospital all the time. I felt like we were going on a mountain expedition when we would pack the backpack for the hospital. But one of her little things was this little wubbanub that she had. It had a pacifier connected to like a little elephant named Sadie. And that was just her comfort toy that we made sure always came with her. And she used to put her finger in the pacifier and then chew on it. And due to all of these treatments and stuff, one time her finger got like so infected from putting it in the pacifier that I had to cut the top off the pacifier. And now she just had this little rubber thing that she would hold onto in an elephant. And so it's just, these are some of the things that, it makes reality real. I mean, I hate to say that, but it makes you think about the littler things, the small things, like the little stuffy that's important to have with you at the hospital, and that you pack the little snacks that they love that make them happy, because they are tolerating something so horrific that I often heard kids tolerate chemo so much better than adults. I don't know, because I've never been through adult chemo, but I can imagine that she had a smile on her face even when there was so much toxic level of chemicals in her system. And so I really look back on that, and I took pictures and I videotaped, and those are some of my favorite memories, is where she could just find joy even through some of the toughest times, and that it made her so much stronger. Just having those comfort items, I think, was kind of one of our saving graces.
As Addie's treatment journey continued from chemo to transplant and searching for new options, you guys were making impossible decisions and trying to still find your normalcy and joy. You spoke about something as simple as a trip to Disneyland could carry a different emotional weight where you guys were. Can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, so I think going through, my husband and I heard things differently when the doctor came back with so after she had her liver transplant, she felt the best she's ever felt. And so that was amazing couple months for us. And we were super grateful. And then that first scan after her liver transplant within a couple months showed really aggressive spread to her lungs. 25 plus nodules which no doctor had ever seen before. We consulted. This is when we started reaching out to anybody, the experts in hepatoblastoma across the country, across the world. And people are like, that's some aggressive spread that we haven't seen before. And, it was really, nobody really knew what to do with us at that point. It was, you can stop treatment or you can continue with recycling the I think we did carboplatin. We kind of recycled those drugs because there was some thought that they could hit the second time. And, we put her through some more extensive chemotherapy, not really knowing if anything was going to work, but we were kind of grabbing at straws at that point with the aggressive spread to the lungs, because they wanted something to stabilize the lung mets before they would even consider operating on them. And nothing was really stabilizing. Nothing was making them smaller. And I think it was just something that I didn't want to hear. I was like, there's always going to be more options. There's always going to be a trial, something we can try. And when I had reached out to several different professional doctors that specialize in hepatoblastoma, I would consider them the world experts. One of them actually said to me, had you considered a trip to Disneyland or doing things that make her happy? And that word hit me very hard, but I still had a lot of hope. And then, I kind of resisted the whole thought of a Make-A-Wish trip and things, because I thought that meant you were giving up. But to be honest, the way I said it to myself is, you know what, we're gonna take this Make-A-Wish trip now, and if she gets better, then we're just going to go again. And so that was the way I kind of thought about, like, we're going to start being present I think in the book I call it living life with the windows down, right? Like
Yeah.
we just started to do all the things in case we didn't have more time because she was feeling well. We actually took her off the medication, off the chemo, because I think that was dragging her down a lot and it wasn't working. And so we decided to live life.
I think that this kind of leads into, the next part of the story, which is I am thinking about it as almost like the next before and after. So, now we're about a year after she's been diagnosed, and we're leading up to her third birthday. She's on hospice care. Can you share with the audience a little bit more about how you were navigating those days with so much uncertainty present?
I think that was really difficult. And you know what? Reflecting back on our journey, Nicole, I think the whole journey is a challenge, right? There's highs and lows, and nobody's been through this before, so nobody knows what to expect. Nobody knows how they're going to feel, and the journey itself was a whole roller coaster. And this was another layer of, now we're completely flying blind, actually. And it was really like, we have no projection for you. We don't know how, we've never seen this before at this stage, like this much, how aggressive it is. It could be very soon. It could be a couple months. We don't know. And so I think at this point, I never lost hope that, I never lost hope that at any given time there could be a trial drug that could come into play that could help her state. And so I think I had a lot of hope that the longer, so we did try some. We went on a trial. We tried some drugs to kind of sustain and maybe buy us some more time that didn't have big side effects. But I think my thought was, like, we don't know how much time we have, but I'm always willing to entertain anything that falls in our lap that says this could be an option, and if we thought it would not really affect her quality of life, and I was waiting for that, but also cognizant of the fact that, we might not have tomorrow. And so that was a very difficult time. And she passed away a few days before Christmas after her third birthday. We did celebrate her third birthday. And she passed away on December 20th, 2016 at home after her third birthday. She was with us for 3 years and 17 days. And I will tell you later on that I'm most grateful for those 3 years and 17 days. But yeah, that was a challenging time. And then I'll share with you, hospice was with us when she passed away at home. And I truly believe that was one of my greatest gifts in life. And so I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But that having that opportunity to have her at home and have her die peacefully, like in my arms, was truly, she came into this world in a beautiful way. And she left this world in a beautiful way. And I don't think I could have asked for more.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I would just want to, talk a little bit more about this, kind of part in Addie's story, if that's okay. I think a lot of people on the call who have experienced profound grief could relate to this next part, which is, after Addie passed, time almost felt irrelevant, and you were kind of living in an outer body state. And I think a lot of us know that even when our world comes to a halt, the world around you keeps spinning. The same commercials keep airing, the same, there's the same daily life things still happening. And I just was wondering if you could talk us through that first year, when you were dealing with grief after Addie's passing, especially all of the firsts that you had to go through without her.
Yeah, throughout my grief journey, it's been over 9 years now. So there's a lot of reflection in looking back. But I will say I'm not forgetting where I was that first year. And that first year was really hard. That first year, Christmas came a couple days later, New Year's came right after that, and an entire year of holidays and birthdays and, things that come up. And I will say that everybody's grief is really unique. And so whether you're experiencing grief from loss of a relationship, loss of a pet, loss of a child, loss of a parent, loss is loss, but everybody's grief, the way they handle it, is truly unique to themselves, right? Those 5 stages can come in any order. And for me, I was pretty numb that whole first year, sort of in disbelief. My husband was a little angry. So now you have the component of a marriage. And also we had Addie's sister, who was 1.5 at the time that she passed away. So I was a little numb. I was parenting her, trying to enjoy all of my days, thinking I have this beautiful child here, but I was present for none of it. And I'm not afraid to say that. I really wanted to be. I just didn't know where to go or what to do with myself. And that's okay, right? The first thing is just giving yourself grace to figure out what's happening in your life right now. And I think that first year was a challenge. And I took on a work position, a leadership position at work. And here's just a little story that's a few minutes to put it into context, is that I thought, okay, I need like some structure. And I was part-time in the military at that time. And they had requested that I come on full-time to backfill a commander that had deployed so I could do it here. And I said, okay, like, I need another focus, right? I need to focus on a mission. I need to kind of move through things. I didn't know what I needed, actually, and most people in grief don't. But I tried. You can only try things and see how you feel. And so I went back, and I felt really good at first. I could really focus on the work. And I brought a family picture on my desk, and it had Addie in it, and it was just the 4 of us. And I had transferred my military job. I transferred my military job to Colorado. So most of these people did not know that my child had just died. And people would walk into my office and say, like, that's a beautiful picture of your family. And I'd say, thank you. How's your family doing? Right? Yeah. Complete avoidance of like talking about it. I didn't want to share her story. I didn't even tell people that I'm struggling inside. I thought as a military leader, like, I didn't want to show too much emotion, and sharing your story makes you, being vulnerable wasn't a great quality in a senior leader. And to be honest, reflecting back, I completely disagree with that. I actually think being a vulnerable leader is a great gift if you work for somebody that can also be open about what's happening in their life. Because what happens, and this is what happened to me, 6 months later, I had just been kind of doing the job and asking people about their life and feeling like they knew nothing about me. And they kept commenting on my beautiful family, that nobody had really known what I was going through. And I just kind of blew up in a staff meeting one day and said, guys, this is what's going on with my life. And I was overwhelmed with the amount of comfort, compassion, support that I received. And the very next day, I had my airmen coming into me saying that they've experienced significant loss, and that grief is one of those things that is, our society is sort of grief adverse. Like, people don't know what to say to people who are grieving. People don't know. They think, oh, I don't want to mention her daughter's name because that might bring up hard things for her. She might break down. And to be honest, there's no right way to handle it. There's not even, I'm going to say, right or wrong things to say. But if you let somebody know that you care, that you can be there to listen for them, and that just that you care about them, and you can say my daughter's name because I actually do want to talk about it, and I want to say her name. It helps me keep her with me. And so I think it's just things people don't understand about grief. And so that first year felt very isolating, very numb. I didn't know what I didn't know. And but then I started connecting with other people, being a vulnerable leader. And also we went through the adoption process that year, where I had grown up with a brother, and I felt very strongly about Millie having a sibling. And so we started the adoption process to adopt another baby to bring into our family. And we actually thought it would take a really long time because they said there's a lot of things people don't know about adoption, but that if you have one child already, it can be hard to find a birth mother that is willing to choose you as a family, because a lot of people want their child to be the first child and the spoiled child and, you know, everything that they can't give them. And so we were prepared for like a 2-year journey to wait. And within months, we had a birth mother that connected with us and said, I just lost my father to liver cancer. I connected with your story, and I feel connected to you guys, and this is the right fit for me. And we said this is the right fit for us. And so we adopted our beautiful daughter, Emma, just before a year after Addie passed away. So it was almost a year, and we adopted her from birth. And that was a beautiful joy in our life. And I wanted to be really present for that. But right on top of that was the 1 year Addie's birthday. December was Christmas, and like all of that's happening simultaneously when I'm having this beautiful joy of adopting a baby. And most people who have experienced significant grief and loss can relate to this, that until you get really used to it, those days leading up are harder than the actual day. You're almost like relieved when the actual day hits, and you put a lot of pressure on yourself to have anniversary. Like, what do we do on the first anniversary, on the second anniversary? Does it need to be consistent every year? And it's hard. You feel this pressure that some people put on themselves. And I would say I had to tell myself, just do whatever you need to that day, you know? And so, yeah, those first couple years were really challenging. And I know a lot of people in initial grief. I did have a beautiful support group through Children's Hospital that really was a key point in my grief journey, that, you know, staying connected to Children's Hospital was amazing because these other moms had lost kids too. And so that was really beautiful connection for me. And that helped me a lot my first couple years.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that you really just touched on something that I think you very eloquently put in your book, is dancing with grief, and just that it's constantly, you know, you're having these amazing moments, and then at the same time you're also experiencing profound loss, and it's just constantly something that you are having to navigate, and there's no set steps that you can follow. You're just, you know, just having to like follow the lead and just, you know, experience as it comes. So thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we adopted Emma. So now we have Emma. And in your book, you wrote about a letter to Santa from Emma on how she wanted to meet Addie. Can you talk about how you guys talk about Addie to this day with the girls and memories that you guys share?
Yeah, so I think one of the learning points for me in grief, and now you guys know that I'm a grief educator and that I'm really feel really passionate about it. But one thing I didn't expect was, you know, how differently my children were going to deal with the grief and how differently they were going to process it, and the years that we were misaligned, right? I thought, okay, it took a couple years, but I really revived the month of December to be joyous for me, where I felt more grateful for what I had than what I didn't. And we wanted to celebrate Addie's birthday and celebrate the joy that she brought to our life, and do community service and bring our friends into it. And we built a research foundation for hepatoblastoma. We built a hepatoblastoma community. And we had done so much to keep her memory alive in our house. And I feel really proud of that. But what I didn't equate for was that my children, who were young at the time, and now they are 8 and soon to be 11 next week, they were not always on the same page as me with processing things. And Emma, who's the youngest, who got adopted almost a year after we lost Addie, is kind of one of the only one, well, she's the only one in the family that hasn't met Addie, and wasn't putting together that she was actually born after Addie passed away. But since her memory is so alive in our family, it's one thing that I know she struggles with, and I didn't really know it until she wrote her beautiful letter to Santa. And this child is just full of empathy and gratitude for everyone in the world. She's such a beautiful addition to our family. She wrote a letter asking Santa if he could bring Addie back just so she could meet her, because she was the only one that didn't meet her, and she felt like she didn't belong in our family because she hadn't met Addie. And Nicola's mom, like, my tears are just streaming down my face, thinking like even I can't make this possible, honey. And I never want her to feel like she's not part of our family because she didn't go through that with us. And so that was, I think, one of the hardest moments in my grief journey, to realize that, to tend to my kids' grief too and be really patient. And they break down and cry too over things that I don't even know what's going on with them. And that's one thing that hit me really hard, knowing that they're also processing. I'm doing all of these things to actively, try to move through my grief and heal. And they are only children, right? And they only see what I'm going through, but they're not always going to be aligned with me. And so, yeah, that was one thing that caught me off guard.
Thank you for sharing that, and for Emma's letter to Santa. Also in your book, you have referenced Tony Robbins. Can you elaborate for those who don't know who he is and what he meant to you in your journey?
Yeah. And so actually he's had a kind of a profound effect on my grief journey, specifically during COVID. And he's a leading world specialist in personal growth, financial growth, entrepreneurship. But for me, it hit in the form of personal growth. So he's been around for 50 years, doing this work. And during COVID, I think Siri was listening to me. And came across my Facebook, and for the first time he was doing virtual event because it was COVID, and I could never really afford to go in person to his big powerful events. And so I took an event during COVID thinking it was going to help me be better, manage my team during COVID. I was operating out of my house with an operations center. We were activated locally with the National Guard, and I thought, I got to keep my team positive, and we're really struggling mentally, and how am I going to do this? So I took a workshop thinking that I was going to figure out how to be a better leader, how to support my team better. And what really came out of it was a tremendous amount of growth for me personally in my grief journey. I think a lot of us can relate to going into something, expecting one thing and getting a different result. Because I was just there. I was present, I was focused, I was ready to receive something, and I heard what he said. And this really is the cornerstone to my entire grief journey. It's why I wrote the book. It's all the things. And he said, when you can figure out what you value more than the pain, that's figure it out. That's what your life is meant to be, right? And so what do you value more than the pain? And for me, it was the presence of not missing out on my girls, not missing out on my family, not missing out on being a mother and a wife and everything I had dreamed about in my whole life. And it really struck me hard. And I thought, yes, I want to be present for it all. I don't want to take any of it for granted, because when you lose a child, you feel like you want to value the ones you have so much. And I just was sort of wondering how I could get present in my life. And you and I both know that just saying things doesn't make them happen, because you can't just say enough positive things to yourself that it becomes true. So once I figured out what I valued more than living a painful memory with her and connecting with Addie in a painful way, I had to figure out how I was going to get to that moment to be present. And another thing that he said that caught me off guard that I thought was pretty ridiculous at the time, but he said, how can your worst day become your best day? And I thought, well, there's probably no way that's going to happen, because my worst day of my life was when Addie passed away. And I'm pretty sure there's no way I'm going to say that's ever my best day. But I will tell you all that after a lot of work, and a lot of processing and deep meditation, I was able to relive the day she passed away over and over, looking for something different. I changed my perspective on what I was looking for, and it became something where I wasn't sad in what I saw. I was looking for the beauty in the moment. And what I realized was that that hospice nurse that was there with me that day truly gave me a gift I could not give to myself, gave me the greatest gift I will say to date in my life. The most proud moment was helping Addie pass away peacefully at home. I did that. And it's for me more of an achievement than any military award I've ever received, that I was able to help my daughter who was suffering, really die peacefully, and watch her leave this earth in just a beautiful way. And I never thought it was possible to see that moment in that way. But when I reprocess it that way, and I tell that story over and over, I actually asked that hospice nurse that night, I said, I don't know how you do it. How do you watch children? How do you guide people through losing their child all the time as a job? And she said, it gives my life purpose. She said, I am helping people at their hardest time in life, and I feel good about that. That is my purpose, and I love what I do. And I thought, oh my gosh, these things that I missed, this is what I missed the first time, just thinking about it being my worst day. And when I was able to look at all of the beauty in the moment, the fact that I did things I didn't think were possible, I had courage I didn't think I had ever had. I met a beautiful hospice nurse that has amazing purpose in her life, that taught me and how to really do something, and just gave me a gift. She gave me a beautiful gift. And when I was able to reprocess it that way, that's when I was able to really come to a conclusion that I'm more grateful for the time that I had with her, the 3 years and 17 days that I had with Addie, than I am for the time I didn't get. I never think about the time I didn't get. I don't think about that wasn't meant for me, right? I wasn't meant to see a college graduation. I was meant to have her in my life the way that she was in it. And I'm super grateful for that. And I feel like I'm in a good place in my life. People would say to me things like, I can't imagine anything worse than losing a child. And that would really hurt. I was like, me neither. Gosh, I'm about as low as I can go. Me neither. But what has come out of that is I can imagine what would be worse is not fully living my life after she passed away in honor of her, and not having those 3 years and 17 days with her for her to impact my life would be worse. Not having Emma in my life would be worse, right? So now I get to be a mom to 3 beautiful girls, and I can't be more grateful for the way my life had turned out, and I don't wish it to be any other way. I wish it to be exactly the way it happened. And I think when you can get to that point, there's a healing that has happened where you can say, I can help other people feel this way too. And that's when I started thinking about, so in my bereavement group, one of the moms became a death doula, and she put on a class that was all about, and I am now starting to teach this class myself, but it's basically living your life with intention, thinking about your own death. And I had never thought about my own death. I had only thought about memorializing Addie, building a foundation for Addie, doing cancer research for Addie, everything. I was so focused on her legacy that I never thought about my own legacy. And so that has been a driving factor for me, that I'm living my legacy right now. The mom I want to be, the person that I want to be, and my healing journey, and what I want my girls to know about me, because I was really young. They were really young when I was going through this, right? And I want them to remember, if I wasn't here tomorrow, I wanted them to remember Addie's journey. I wanted them to remember my grief journey. And so I wrote a book. I said, my legacy could be this book, and it's going to be in our hard drive. I mostly wrote it for my girls to have the story, because nobody else could tell it from my perspective. And I got up every morning at 5 a.m. I took a $10 online class, $10 online, on like writing a memoir. Got up every morning at 5 a.m. for several months, and I just wrote it. And that was actually 4 years ago before I published it. And so it's been on my hard drive for 4 years. Wow. And then over the last couple of years, I've been having these revelations, like, other people can benefit from the growth in my grief. Other people can relate to my hepatoblastoma story, my cancer story, my loss story. And so I decided to publish it to really connect with other people, so other people felt less alone, understood that, could connect with some of my journey, and just understood that there's no normal way to grieve. There's no normal way to go through cancer. We're all just trying to make it in this world, right? And be present in our life. And so, so I published it last year, and I just did the audiobook, which the audiobook, I just finished it. It's going to be released like next month. But what's really special is I was able to bring some of Addie's clips of her like voice and from some videos. And so it's really like a personal legacy project that I'm able to put it together and have her voice on there. And I narrated it, which I'm not a great narrator, but it's very true to me. So I learned how to do that and just kind of went with it, knowing that I hope other people can benefit from the story.
Thank you so much, Christina. I think that was just such a powerful account of really the concept of the book, as you were saying, and just how to transform grief and to so much more. And you touched on so much, and just in how you were able to transform this for you personally, how you're able to honor Addie in so many different ways, all the way down to your dandelion tattoo, all the way to these grand foundations and resources that you've put together for other families who are going through the same thing. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. I just would like to ask one last question before we turn it over to ask a couple of Q&As from the audience. But if somebody is opening I Carry You for the first time, what do you hope that they understand when they first start reading?
Oh, that's a great question. I think what I would tell them is that to keep reading, that the ending is really good. Because I know some people have said, like, this is so hard, I'm crying, like, it's hard. But to be honest, I think you learn from some of your hardest moments in life. And there's a reason that I wrote the hard stuff in there, because I know there are families out there that are going to connect with the hard stuff. And I know that they need to hear that there's hope, and that the story is going to end well, and that there's going to be a lot of insights and connection that you may feel through the book if you've experienced significant loss. At the end, there's a 7-step process to transform your own grief, to find the life waiting for you too, in the context. If you've been through something similar in your life, I just wrote down all the steps. Anybody can do it, but that the hardest thing to say is that this didn't happen to me overnight, right? This is a multi-year journey that required a lot of work. And for people to just realize that, I think maybe they'll have the patience to read through the book, knowing that there's a lot of discovery in it, and might discover things about yourself too. when you're reading through it. Yeah.
I totally agree. It's a beautiful read, and yes, like I know that I definitely cried a lot during the book, but
Mhm.
I also laughed a lot, and I was just it's just you, like you said, you have these moments of just profound joy, and you have these incredibly tough moments, but I will say that, you know, it's just a real reflection of the human experience in this case when you're facing this type of thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Christina. I think we're going to go to Q&As.
Yeah.
If anyone has any questions they want to ask, please do so. In the meantime, Christina, you talked about you guys being in Fairbanks, Alaska, and then when you went over to Colorado to Children's. What made you stay at Children's versus were you referred out to anybody else? Did you want to stay there with family? What made you stay in Colorado?
Yeah, so here's the thing. We were at a very small town in Alaska that would not be able to handle her treatment. They're actually getting better over the years. They actually do handle cancer treatment now. But when she got her transplant, we knew that we needed to be by a major center, and we had family in Colorado. And so we literally came with a suitcase and never went back to our house. We lived out of a suitcase for a year. Our friends sold our house, and we bought a new house here in Colorado that Addie spent 12 days in, which has some of my most beautiful memories with her on the swings at this house. And it really carries a lot of joy for us to have her presence here. But yeah, it turns your life kind of upside down. Many families, I've been a part of many people's stories that, you know, they move for treatment, they have to be dislocated from family for treatment. And there's a lot of different things with these rare cases that you'll do. It's just, you have to find what's best for your family. But yeah, for us, there was no hope of going back. And so we relocated and to be near family, and that worked out for us. So
I wanted to ask you if you wanted to share your favorite memory of Addie in the book or outside of the book, just all around your favorite memory.
I will just say, I think seeing her joy on the swings and the slide and her giggles and how happy she is just swinging through the air, just was one of my favorites.
I love
That's
that.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, you know, you do touch on that too in the book, and just saying, you know, like, you know, sometimes we think it's like life happens in these big, grand, sweeping gestures, but really it really comes down to just those little moments. Like, I love that you were talking about like the giggles at Target and those little things that just, you know, it's those moments that really matter. So
It really puts life into perspective when you go through something like this. And even when you read a story, like, I don't even know if I was open to movies and being impacted by stories, but I don't think I ever could have related it to myself before something like this happened to me. And so now I see the St. Jude commercials in like a whole new light, right? Like they just hit differently. And for most of us who have been through it, it hits differently. And so yeah, I'm really honored to like be part of this community and stay so active in hepatoblastoma and the community that I built. So the thing about grief is you find purpose in building things. It's all part of our healing. And so building the Hepatoblastoma Resource Network, building the foundation where we support cancer research, building my grief business and everything I share to help people live with intention today, is all really a purpose driven by Addie. And so that's part of my healing journey. And so every opportunity that I get to talk to people, to be associated with you guys, I have loved our partnership. And I think what you guys do for the hepatoblastoma community is amazing. You know, I was always looking for that other option. Like, what's the next option? What trial is available for my child to have that hope of even longer? Like, I will say that even our research, we target less toxic drugs. We also target like drugs that can sustain the growth, because that could lead to surgery and survival for a hepatoblastoma patient. So, and to be honest, even if it gives you more time, I think that that can be beautiful as well. We won't know until everything is ironed out with all the treatments and the trials. But had we been on a trial that even gave us more time, I would have been grateful. I'm grateful for the transplant that gave us more time. And you can only look back and say that medicine is practice and everybody's working towards, more of our children surviving. But here's the reality, is that everybody dies. Everybody, like, nobody gets out alive. We know nobody knows when our time will be. And it has really been a reflection for me on being present in the moment and being grateful for each day that I get as a gift with my children, with my family, because nobody's guaranteed any more time. Even if our child had survived, we'd have kind of a relapse hovering over us. And even if she survived 5 years after that, there's always there, nobody knows their time on this earth. And so I think putting that into perspective has really brought me kind of the best joy in my life, knowing that today matters. And like you said, Nicole, it really is the small moments. Right? We say, like, live like you're dying, but really you don't need to go skydiving. You just need to watch your kids on the swings, or those things that you may not get in the future, and you don't know. Nothing's guaranteed. So I believe it's so many of those small moments. That's what it was for me. And that's just a big reflection over the last 9 years. And hopefully that's what people can take away. I had one review from my husband, so also men can read this too. It's a lot related to mothers, but the men that have read it have said things like, I was so inspired by the story that, like, I just want to be a better dad, more present, and, like, it hit them too. And so I think that, and my husband wrote the epilogue, and, like, it was a family thing. My mom wrote the foreword. We really, I had a lot of support. And so we'll see where it all goes, but it's leading to partnerships that I can only feel are healing for me and helping other people. And that's the gift in grief, I think.
Yes, thank you so much for just, that's a wonderful way for us to conclude the webinar. Christina, I just wanted to say thank you again for sharing Addie's story. And again, for those of you who are listening who have not yet read the book, you can get your copy of I Carry You by Christina Stiverson on Amazon.com. Sounds like the audiobook is coming out next month for our audio readers, so please keep an eye out for that as well. Again, we're here today to recognize and honor Hepatoblastoma Awareness Day, and we encourage everyone here to carry Addie's story forward, whether that's sharing what you learned today, supporting other families through research, through foundations, or just reflecting on how Addie's story touched your life. So as a reminder, for those of you that are currently facing a hepatoblastoma diagnosis, please always consider what your options are. Talk to your doctor. We do have the ARIA-2 clinical trial available to you. It's looking at T-cell therapy for the treatment of AFP-positive hepatoblastoma, and we currently have sites active throughout the U.S. So if you'd like to learn more about the ARIA-2 clinical trial, you can visit our website at www.eurekaconnectme.com. We'll also have a link to the recording for today's webinar on our website as well. You can check that out here shortly. So again, Christina, thank you so much for being here today and sharing Addie's story. And thank you to everyone else taking the time to reflect with us. So thank you.